If there are so many rules and regulations for adopting a child to ensure they grow up in a stable home, why aren't there the same requirements to create one? As soon as there is a system to control who can and can't have kids, the worst people you've heard of will do everything they can to control that system. The regulations do not really ensure the kid grows up in a stable home. You have a mistaken perception there. The regulations exist to keep kids from getting adopted by psychopaths and abusers. So they are not making sure the home is good, they are just making sure it's not too far past the second or third level of hell. The process itself weeds out those not serious about adoption. There's still lots of abuse though, lots of abuse. Enforcement. It is very easy to prevent someone from legally adopting someone. It is very difficult to stop someone from having their own kids. Even if you had zero corruption, zero bad people who don't like a specific race of human trying to prevent them from having kids, you would still run into an endless amount of problems. Should autistic people be allowed to have kids? What of people with cystic fibrosis or Huntington's? Let's say we are a hive mind of a civilization and we all agree on all of those problems too. How do you enforce it? Someone got pregnant by accident, they didn't even intend on breaking the law. Do we make it mandatory abortion? Or do we take the child from the parents and try and give them to someone who wants one? Are there enough people who want children to take on the massive load of accident babies? Or do we stop the flood of accident babies at the start by mandating every child who is going through puberty be sterilized until they can pass the tests and regain the right to their own reproductive system? It's just not doable outside of a dystopian novel. Adoptee-parent here. My wife and I adopted our daughter from foster care in 2022. The so many rules and regulations you're referring to can be summed up as follows. Don't abuse drugs, pass a background check, be in a decent financial position, keep the home in good shape. No exposed wires, filthy conditions, meth labs, etc. Attend parental training hours was 1-hour classes, twice a week for 6 weeks. Lock up your firearms if applicable, secure your pool if applicable. No anti-vaxxers. This was a surprising requirement, but not one we disagreed with. While the forms and documentation themselves took a while to fill out, most people are surprised when my wife and I tell them how easy it can be to adopt children from the foster system, which is what the foster system wants. There are hurdles to jump through, but nothing insurmountable. That said, it would be extremely difficult for a state federal agency to enforce these requirements on prospective parents. How are they going to force them to comply? And what consequences could there be for failing? That would end up being eugenics. Get where you're coming from, but controlling who can have kids is unrealistic. Get the thought, but regulating parenthood sounds like a dystopian nightmare to me. What are you going to do? Ban sex? Because those are two hugely different things. If you want to create rules about me having sex, then you are invading my and my partner's privacy. If you say it's not about sex, but about the child, wonderful. You and your taxpayers can take all my children. I'm not complying with your paperwork. If I have to apply for them, I don't want them. You'll keep having sex, and you can keep the kids. Have fun. But once you already have a child that is the responsibility of the state, then the state has a burden to make sure that anyone they turn the child over to will be a responsible guardian. I think it comes down to concepts like freedom and agency. We tolerate a world of horrific parenting because the alternative of a state-mandated parenting standard is unthinkable. For the same reason women are supposed to have the right to choose and end a pregnancy. The government telling women if and when they can have a baby is incredibly fascist, and that shouldn't be the USA. Because a system only allowing the right people to have kids could justify stopping people for literally any reason. Will physically disabled people not be allowed to have children because they are not as stable as others? Members of certain races? No one wants these rules? Also, the fertility rate would likely drop hugely, massively affecting the West's economy. Because, even without taking eugenics into account, the only effective ways you could enforce those requirements would all involve some sort of extreme human rights violation. Just think about it. Because that's called eugenics and it's generally considered a bad idea. When you start creating rules about who can have children, bad actors tend to hijack the system almost immediately. Why don't we take people's children away and make them earn them back? Because it would result in eugenics. Making laws for everything sounds great when you don't think about it. How would you even begin to enforce that? Have all women go on mandatory birth control? The rules do exist and have often been used in the past to separate minority, in particular indigenous children, from their parents. Indigenous parents have been called unfit for not having milk in the refrigerator even when the whole family is lactose intolerant. Because there is literally no scenario that doesn't end in eugenics and human rights violations.